It's taken just 2 consecutive Saturdays for Pauline Hanson to rise again from the political ashes. In Western Australia and last night in Queensland, Pauline Hanson's One Nation party wreaked havoc on conservative politics in Australia. She swept across the country, feeding off voter disenchantment with everything from the GST and petrol prices to speed cameras and boat people. This week we hitched up with the Hanson Crusade and found a more confident, polished politician who's mastered a devastating political tactic. No one can deny that Pauline Hanson is back with a vengeance.
2 hands up if you can, Pauline. 2 hands up, Victor.
No, I don't want to.
Pauline Hanson dominated the Brisbane tally room last night, witnessing the decimation of the coalition parties in Queensland.
I will also be leaving politics, and I will be leaving politics forthwith.
Twice in 2 weeks, she's proven herself the slayer of conservative politicians.
I'm not there to keep the bastards honest. I'm there to get rid of the bastards. I'm here to get rid of the bastards.
In Vietnam, a different war was born, marching, calling.
This past week, One Nation supporters have been filling halls in the urban fringes and small towns of southeast Queensland, cheering the return of Pauline Hanson.
Marching, calling. We're so glad that you're here on the wall. As here's Pauline Hanson.
It's an incredible re-emergence for the woman who only 4 weeks ago was dismissed as a political has-been. There was a point, though, where you gave up, wasn't there?
Felt disillusioned.
You
Yes.
threw in the towel. Didn't you throw in the towel? Just for a minute or two?
I felt terribly disillusioned, yes, of actually wanting to walk away from the whole lot.
What brought you to that point?
Probably sheer frustration with everything, like everyone. And my supporters then rallied around and I've said, OK, so you keep going.
She says what I think, and the majority of my neighbours are the same. They think that she walks on water.
What Pauline Hanson does well is campaigning. Simple messages, seductive ideas for supporters baffled and angry about an increasingly complex world.
She's right in what she says. We don't get a fair go.
You should be able to defend yourself in your own home with a firearm. And that's what Pauline is saying there, so we support that.
And so would you shoot an intruder into your home?
Yes, if we had to, for sure.
Unless we make the punishment fit the crime, we're going to get more and more prisoners, because when they go to prison, they go into a motel unit and they're given comfort and food and all the necessary comforts of civilization.
What should happen to them in jail?
Well, I reckon in overseas countries, they give them the lash.
Tough on criminals, tough on illegal immigrants. Pauline Hanson knows the right buttons to push.
And I've been asked, what's your view about the boat people? Well, I said, you go out, you meet them, you fill them up with fuel, you fill them up with food, you give them medical supplies, and you say, go that way.
You'd send them off?
Yes. These people are paying fishing boats from Indonesia for their passage out here. These people are not fearing for their lives. These people are queue jumpers. These people are tourists searching for wherever they wish to go to at the taxpayers' expense of Australia. So these people have no right here.
Tourists, women and children from Iraq, would you send them back to Saddam Hussein?
These people are not and should have no right in this country.
But this is the people we're talking about.
Well, then,
women and children who are fleeing Iraq. Would you turn them around and send them back to Saddam Hussein?
Yes.
We've had a lot of problems in the past with Pauline just picking up something in dinner conversation prior to a public speaking engagement following the dinner and then she would get up and sprout something which was inconceivably ridiculous because it just sort of went into her head during dinner.
David Oldfield should know. Until he was expelled by Mrs. Hanson, Oldfield was her closest advisor, a director of the party. But like many who have worked with her, he's now turned against her.
Very little of it would be something she's really thought up herself. A lot of it would be just ideas, if you like, that are not terribly sustainable when it comes to, like the idea of turning people around. I can understand how you'd like to do that, turning around the boat people, but the idea that you're going to give them food and medical supplies, what are you going to give them, a St John's ambulance first aid kit or something? It's just not real.
From a plumber's wife's background to having 4 kids to running a fish and chip shop, that's what I am.
We're so proud to see you march some more.
She says she's still not a polished politician, but she can hold a crowd spellbound.
Here we have Gough Whitlam, right, who's costing us more now than what he did when he was Prime Minister, and he's a total reject.
Her views strike just the right chord from the perks of former politicians.
And I would cut the former Prime Ministers off at the knees and they wouldn't get 1 red cent out of the taxpayer.
To the unfairness of speed cameras,
which have become unfair revenue collectors.
As is Pauline Hanson.
Now, at the moment, our national road toll is a catastrophe. But you got a big round of applause back there when you said get rid of the speed cameras so that when you're speeding in your car you won't get a big dirty fine.
I didn't say get rid of them. You got prioritise it with speed cameras.
You said reduce the number of speed cameras.
Exactly. Reduce, not get rid of.
What is the problem with speed cameras?
You ask the Australian people out there, it's a revenue raiser, and you want to have a listen to a lot of Australians out there, how they feel about it.
It's a quick round of applause for you. It's irresponsible.
No, it's not irresponsible. Actually, we have a policy of compulsory defensive driving course for first-time licence holders.
If you don't speed, you won't get caught by the speed camera. But Pauline Hanson stands for less speeding fines. How can you stand up for that? How can you?
You're not interested in listening to our policy. You're not interested in listening to the people of Australia, are you?
If you don't speed, there'll be no revenue to raise. And if you don't speed, less Australians will die on the roads. That's what they tell us. I mean this quite sincerely.
You actually bring in a compulsory defensive driving course so people know how to drive on our roads, and you teach them from the beginning, our youth, and you teach them how to handle a car.
Well, then it won't matter how many speeding cameras there are out there, will it?
You do not specifically set up speed cameras specifically as revenue raisers, ripping off the Australian people out there.
Some of the things that Pauline has been credited as saying over the years that have not made terribly much sense or been easily torn apart, they're usually things that have been popped in her head by somebody she's spoken to 15 minutes beforehand.
You got a good response earlier about lowering the educational requirements for entry into the police force.
Yes.
Now, the rest of the world is accepting at this point in time that in fact we need to have smarter police to deal with increasingly sophisticated criminals. Why would you do the opposite?
Because you give everyone the opportunity to be able to join the police force. By putting too high a standards of education on some people, we are keeping good people out of the police force who would make very good streetwise police officers.
So, dumber cops.
Yeah. That is a very denigrating remark, especially if you have a look back over the years of people who have actually joined the police force over the years who didn't have their university degrees and have made fantastic policemen and policewomen in this country.
But if the standard's here now and you want to reduce the standard, Pauline Hanson's for dumber cops.
Is a complete put down to the Australian people. That's an insult. It really is. Whether it's populist ideas or common sense policies or trying to get a fair go for all Australians or Queenslanders, I'll continue to fight for it. And I've seen the change in our governments who are now bending at the knees because they realise that if they don't start listening to the Australian people, they won't be there.
She's usually best when she's a combination of angry with what's going on but happy about her success. If you combine those two things, then she's usually able to come across quite competently. But as soon as things sort of start to go wrong, she's likely to be a quivering wreck who's just going to make mistake after mistake.
I think she thought she was the answer to everything, and she was the, dare I say, the sole reason for everyone else living.
And you know Bill Feldman?
Yes, of course I do know.
You'll need the headphones too.
Her biggest failure came after her greatest triumph. Bill Feldman was one of 11 One Nation MPs elected at the last Queensland election.
The going got a bit tough, and they got going, that's all I have to say.
But within months, the party was deregistered, the fraud squad was investigating, and Feldman and his colleagues had deserted Pauline Hanson, her party and her leadership style.
It's my way or no way. And that is the sign of a dictator. The structure of the party was autocratic. That brought about its deregistration in this state. And when the party was deregistered up here, we were left absolutely floundering.
What was Pauline Hanson's response to your dilemma?
Basically, it'll be all right. Don't worry about it.
Even those who say she can't manage One Nation say she's hit on a lethal way of targeting the other political parties. It's a devastating tactic. In Western Australia, she directed One Nation preferences against sitting members who put her at the bottom of their ticket.
But on those percentages, well then I would pick up a seat in the Senate.
It's vindictive, but brilliant, and causes political havoc.
Pauline Hanson's come back with a ripper with this put the sitting member last, and she's doing it for self-survival. She said, if they're going out to get me, I'm going down with all guns blazing. And great line, great line.
Why is it that Miss Hanson sacked you?
Oh, look, I'll be talking about that later.
Pauline Hanson once sacked John Pasquarelli.
Have you made threats towards her at all, Mr. Pasquarelli?
Well, I mean, I'm saying it's bizarre and it's also very sad.
But now her former advisor is back in the inner circle, applauding vengeance as a political tactic.
Pauline Hanson has suddenly decided that she's going to change the way politics are played in Australia. Now, the big boys are going to have to cop it. Put the sitting member last. It's diabolical.
Well, Pauline's preference policy, of course, is related to putting the sitting member last, regardless of that person's political persuasion or philosophical background. And that, of course, creates what is essentially electoral anarchy.
You've described it as the politics of vengeance.
It is, yeah, it is. It has a great basis in revenge. That's what it is. And I mean, Pauline is very comfortable in a state of anger.
Your policies, your preferences policies are based on revenge. You don't care, sane, insane, corrupt, honest, whether they agree with your policies or not. You say, unless you preference me, I won't preference you. Now, where's the morality in that?
You tell me how you do it when you've got all the major parties and everyone preference you last. Well, you tell me how you do it.
You do it on your principles. You decide what your principles are.
I think I better stick with the political side of this instead of, and not you, as far as strategy and how to make sure that your party is still around in the long run to actually you can get a foot in the door.
Why don't you go through and decide whose policies you prefer? Isn't that your responsibility?
It is now well and truly time to cut this interview because I have got a speaking engagement to go to tonight.
Mrs. Hanson, the bottom line here is you do what's best for Pauline Hanson, not what's best for Australia.
Cheers.
But if Pauline Hanson won't call a spade, her advisor John Pasquarelli will call it a bloody shovel.
They've got to come round and listen one day, and then Mr Beasley's going to have, if he becomes the next Prime Minister, he will owe it to Pauline Hanson. She will make sure that he never forgets it. He'll have nightmares every night. I think that's good. It'll keep him on his toes. And they're going to have to come and deal with Pauline Hanson.
And if Canberra has been slow to hear that message from the West, it's come in loud and clear from Queensland.
Hello, I'm Tara Brown. Thanks for watching 60 Minutes Australia. Subscribe to our channel now for brand new stories and exclusive clips every week. And don't miss out on our extra minutes, segments and full episodes of 60 Minutes on 9now.com.au and the 9Now app.